You're listening to the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WYBC.
WCYTV
Here on the Daily Signal.
Good evening and welcome to the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated first on 93 WIBC. We're going to try to give you as much of the weekly roundup of news as we can before we head into a weekend that perhaps rather foolishly I thought was going to be restful. No. At the end of last night, as we were wrapping up our Lee Greenwood interview, we got an alert that we were not too excited to know that we were going to be watching for the next couple of hours. But there are other developing stories other than just Israel and Iran. And we'll get to Israel and Iran, absolutely. But first and foremost, tomorrow is the big, huge day of protests that are totally going to be peaceful. We pinky promise. Definitely. These No Kings protests, and definitely not riots, are supposed to rise people to action and say, hey, here in the U.S., we don't want a king. Actually, I haven't seen what it is that they're doing this for. They're mad. That's pretty much it. They're very angry at Donald Trump because Donald Trump sent in the National Guard to stop people from setting cars on fire in Los Angeles because the ICE agents, they carried out arrest warrants from judges in California. Those horrible, stinky, evil people. And so, again, these No Kings protests are supposed to outline that they're very mad about that and also very, very mad about Senator Alex Padilla. Who is Senator Alex Padilla, you might ask? No one else knew until this week either. So we're going to get into that. But first, let's talk about this No Kings organization because there are a lot of rumors circulating about whether or not this protest organization is receiving dark money from various groups and how it's actually operating and whether it's sending in paid protesters and rioters and agitators into certain areas. Chris Cuomo went on a long kind of an expose rant on News Nation saying that realistically, we've got all of these protests that are about to happen, and they're actually all funded by China. And of course, your ears perk up because Chris Cuomo, we just criticized on the show earlier this week for tutting illegal immigrant crime as a problem in this country. So Chris Cuomo starts going on this long story of how because this particular group called Churla is funding the legal defense of illegal immigrants, he suggests that this particular crew is basically just taking money straight from China, and that's funding the protests. I'm going to be real with you. That's not entirely true. That's not entirely true. So there are several Chinese funnel nonprofit organizations. For example, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, whom you may know as the crew that supplied the guy who firebombed women and children in Aurora, Colorado. Or excuse me, not that one, the other terrorist attack, the one in Washington, D.C., who assassinated the two young people. They supplied that individual, not the Aurora guy. That's an illegal immigrant who overstayed his visa. It's hard to keep all of these Marxist terrorists straight. But Churla is not technically funding the protests and the riots themselves. This is what Chris Cuomo gets wrong. Actually, the Churla group funds the legal defense of illegal immigrants. So this particular group promises to essentially bankroll your stay in jail and lawyer fees and that and try to keep you from being deported out of the country. That's what that group is funding. Now, is that foreign funding? And also, according to a couple of documents that producer Nick has drudged up for us, $15.3 million coming in from the city of Los Angeles as well to this particular group? Yes. So you do have the city of Los Angeles essentially charging taxes to its citizens, again, not the illegal immigrants, but to its citizens to pay for the legal services of illegal immigrants. And then the backfill of that funding comes in through Chinese non-profit organizations, a lot of whom have foreign funding. So that's one of the main groups that is involved in some ways, shapes, and forms with this particular No Kings march. Now, No Kings is an actual organization in and of itself. It's sponsored by all of these various unions, like the service union of sorts, and then teachers unions and all other kinds of labor unions, suggesting that this is the common working man standing up against kings. No, I'm afraid not at all. And here's the good reason why. So Walton heiress Christy Walton has decided that it's time to step in and also fund this particular No Kings crew. So she being the heir to the entire Walmart empire. And several other pro-union groups, which had originally come in and were doing this kind of grassroots left-wing activism thing. Well, now it turns out that a lot of those unions are really frustrated that union dues, i.e. the union money that is supposed to help individuals in factories across the country, or schools, I guess, argue for better wages. Now that money might be going towards the No Kings organization for these protests, and definitely not riots that are supposed to be going on tomorrow. So according to Jason Rance over on KTTH, a member of the Washington State Nursing Association is incredibly upset that the union is pushing this No Kings rally and possibly using union dues for a rally that is just explicitly to yell about Trump. Now, we've talked about this for a long time. This, from my experience in education, teachers' unions using money in union dues annually to fund their political activities instead of, again, trying to assist in increasing wages and making working conditions better, which is what unions say they're supposed to be doing. What can you expect, though? Well, most likely what we're going to see is George Soros and Hans Zorg Weiss NGOs funnel money in from outside of the country. That's a Swiss billionaire, or perhaps from Chinese-funded the Party for Liberation and Socialism, and, being pushed into mass open graves, funding this No Kings rally to protest Donald Trump. That's it. There's no extra juicy, secret, savory details here that suggest anything worthwhile in the No Kings protest or any of the goals that are aimed and achieved at. And I've spoken with individuals who are already participating in various protests around the country, one here in Indianapolis, that apparently for one moment there was like a 10 or 15 minute stretch where no one knew what was going on or what to chant, because there's really nothing at all to do with these protests. They're not protesting anything. There's nothing to protest. And that's something that's really hilarious to watch, because no one's really learning a lesson here. And the political left needs to get this through their head before midterms, but they're absolutely not. Not at all, in any way, shape, or form. And it's hilarious to watch, because right now the left seems to have one goal and one goal only. Everything the Trump administration does is fascist, and so therefore scream about fascism. That's it. That's the goal. That's the plan. That's the move. That's all they have. Nothing on policy that might benefit Americans. Nothing on possibly a vision in a future for the country. Nothing on policies that they don't like because of certain specific actions. So far, whenever the Trump administration does anything at all, whether it's a policy, whether it's an executive order, whether it's a judicial decision that really has nothing to do with the Trump administration, whether it's a world event halfway across the globe, whether it's law enforcement officers detaining a man temporarily for rushing the Secretary of Homeland Security, the left's move is just to scream fascism. That's it. And you might be out there. In fact, I'm sure that you're out there if you're listening or tuning into this in any way, shape, or form. You might be thinking, well, didn't they try this already? Haven't they been calling Donald Trump Hitler for the better part of a decade? And the answer is, yeah. Yes, they have. Ever since Trump came down that golden escalator, he's been Orange Hitler. Unfortunately for them, they have been claiming that this is the last week of democracy every single week since he came down that escalator in 2015. So what do they actually have here? Essentially nothing. They're not learning any lessons. Instead, they're somehow making the same mistakes worse each and every time. And that brings us into some of the most recent acts of news. Again, of course, we're looking at the Trump military parade in Washington, D.C. tomorrow for the Army's 250th birthday. And it's, again, really benign for a parade, given like what a lot of countries do. Here's a clip of the soldiers that are marching into town preparing for the parade tomorrow. So if you are listening to this, I'll describe it to you. Imagine very basic military parade march, or like a high school marching band level of marching. That's really it. It's very standard parade march for any platoon, period. Radio crew, we got to send you to commercial. We'll catch you on the flip side of it. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. There really is nothing special about this. I mean, again, you've seen the North Korean military parades. You've seen the Chinese and the old Soviet military parades where they all have their arms up and they're doing their goose stepping and it like a lot of flags and all kinds of extra flash and craziness. This is just a celebration of what appears to be U.S. servicemen in different uniforms throughout history. So what you have is a couple of companies that are dressed in the Vietnam fatigues, a couple of companies dressed in the Gulf War fatigues. Those currently on screen right now appear to be dressed in what was worn kind of in field dress in the Korean War. And so on and so forth. It's just a celebration of the 250 years of this country. Now, here's the problem. The left is patently insane. And they have already started likening this. Again, like major influencers and Congress people are suggesting that watching U.S. troops do their march, that apparently this is North Korea. And we're all watching a bunch of goose-stepping fascist thugs tromping on through the city, which, by the way, is a serious insult to our soldiers and our airmen and sailors. That's like really disgusting. But, you know, again, the left has no actual conscience of what it is that they're insulting. That's why, again, as the Marines were moving into Los Angeles, because, you know, several of the buildings were being attacked and burned and graffitied and cars burned and businesses looted, people were throwing things at the Humvees of Marines moving through the area. And this all boils down to the way that Democrats are acting in Congress, who've taken every moment, no matter what it is, to suggest that every poster released by the administration, any tweet, is somehow Soviet propaganda. From Maryland, Representative Kuise Mafume has decided to say that a poster released by the administration is actually advertising the Gestapo. Check it out.
With Uncle Sam there holding up the sign. This could have been a Gestapo member 75 years ago. Report all Jews.
So he's saying in his own special way that Uncle Sam putting up a little poster that says, hey, you know, report suspicious activity and, you know, the kinds of terrorism that people have witnessed. Report any kinds of, you know, suspicious terrorism like we did after 9/11. Like, in fact, has been a proper procedure of any country since the World Wars. If you see suspicious activity, report it. There's nothing racist about that. And he goes, it could be, it's just like the Gestapo, turn in all the Jews. They have nothing else to say, nothing else of value.
100 years before that, it could be a plantation owner that said, report all Negroes and all coloreds and all those who are from Africa.
That's never been a thing in the United States ever. That's never, ever, ever been a thing in the United States at any point in time. Again, that would be kind of problematic, given that there were a large group of people in the United States in the South who were black, who also owned slaves. So it doesn't work to say, report any black people, when there were people in the black part of the demographic that were participating, in fact, in that particular horrible way of governing society. Again, the Democrats don't actually know that about history because they don't read history. They know nothing about it. They simply know three historical events. They know slavery and the Civil War. They know World War II. And I joked, they actually know two events in history. That's it. That's all they understand. So they only can compare someone to Hitler, letter A, or B, compare something to slavery. That's all they have. And it's not going to get any prettier for them because now we get to Gavin Newsom and Padilla. It all comes to California because of course it does. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast. We're going to pick up the radio crew from commercial. Don't go anywhere.
It's the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIPC.
Welcome back to the Tony Kinnett Cast. It's good to be with you. The left is just driving the struggle bus as fast as they can. And the weirdest part of all of this is that it's all self-caused. It's all self-caused. All of the things that Democrats are currently whining about, all of it, every single piece of it, is something that in the last couple of months they have brought upon themselves. And I don't mean that they brought upon themselves in the way that, someone is walking merrily along and they make a mistake and the consequences then stick with them. It's not like they were in a really tough spot and they had to make an unpopular decision because of principles. No. The things that Democrats are complaining about, which is California and the National Guard, Senator Alex Padilla getting tackled on his way up shouting towards Kristi Noem's podium, and what else are they whining about right now? That's pretty much it. Those are things they caused. Those are things they did to themselves. And they're running through the country crying, the fascists are coming, the fascists are coming. And it's hilarious watching them fall on their faces due to something that they, in fact, came up with the idea for in the first place. Again, it was Mayor Karen Bass of Los Angeles who ordered the Los Angeles Police Department not to assist federal enforcement carrying out judges' warrants in California. Even when those federal officers were getting attacked, people were committing city laws or violating city laws, state laws, as well as federal laws. She didn't send in the LAPD, which resulted in the necessity for the National Guard being brought in. Well, they're still very, very, very angry about this. And so Gavin Newsom, he sued the Trump administration saying, you can't federalize the National Guard. I demand you give them back right now. And Trump said, no, the law since 1940 says that the president can federalize any unit of the National Guard for a series of reasons under Title 10. And also, if he wants to, he can invoke the Insurrection Act. Neither Title 10 nor the Insurrection Act require the president to be granted position to control the National Guard by a governor. Those are in the title of the 30s. That's way away from Title 10. Not at all. And by the way, both Republican and Democrat presidents have called in the National Guard not just without the consent of governors, but against the wishes of governors to restore order. And Trump just brought in troops to restore order at federal buildings in Los Angeles. That's it. And Gavin Newsom filed a lawsuit. And then, because Judge Breyer didn't immediately issue an injunction of his own free will, which is what Newsom thought he should do, Newsom then files an emergency motion and says, please, please, please rip the National Guard away from the commander-in-chief and give it back to me, the governor of the state of California, which would have caused a constitutional crisis. And so Judge Breyer said, well, no, we're going to have a hearing first. And then yesterday evening, while we were all getting a little bit busier with, Israel and Iran and everything, then out of the clear blue sunlit skies, Judge Breyer says, yeah, okay, Trump, you have until noon tomorrow, what would end up being today, Friday, June 13th, to give Gavin Newsom back the National Guard. I am ruling in favor of Newsom, which is wild. And throughout the entire decision, by the way, if I can find this particular photo to show you guys the description here, I'm looked through the entire conclusion. He does not state anywhere at all, what federal law grants Gavin Newsom the authority to take federalized troops from the president of the United States. Nowhere in it. And so what does Gavin Newsom do immediately? Well, he takes himself a nice victory lap. And so he gets out in front of the country immediately. Again, this is last night while the Iran situation was developing. He gets out in front of the country and he starts celebrating in this big, huge press conference. He's so excited. Check it out.
So I'm very hopeful this order puts that in perspective, and hopefully Donald Trump will immediately back down. The courts have ruled on the Guard.
You can see that he's so excited. And by the way, in the tweet that he pinned, he's very excited. But in this, he has to fake being. He has to kind of fake being kind of somber over this. So he's got the big fake tears going, like a junior high girl trying to force herself to cry to get what she wants.
They will be back under my command, and he'll be relieved. Donald Trump will be relieved of his command at noon tomorrow.
So he was very excited. And then 1 hour later, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals weighed in and said, let's see if I can put this in the correct legal way. No. Now, that would be use the legal Latin terminology there. They say the court has received the government's emergency motion, this would be from Trump, for stay pending special appeal, and they granted it, saying, you know what, on June 17th, which is arguably one of the best days of the year, no particular reason why, we are going to allow both sides to hold, or they're going to join the Zoom hearing, and the appeals court is very likely going to rule the president of the United States, under the authority of Title X, in fact, gets to keep the National Guard. So Newsom immediately took the pin out of the post and just let it become one of the social media posts because people came in from the rooftops to roast him over a situation, and he's out there crying fascism, it's terrible, it's horrible, oh no, it's awful. And no, it's not fascist. You should have sent in the National Guard. You chose not to. So then the federal government chose to send it in to protect the people of Los Angeles. It's fantastic. That brings us over to Senator Alex Padilla, which is, I love this story so much. It gets better and better and better. As a refresher for those who weren't here with us yesterday, there was footage that emerged of Alex Padilla being dragged out of this press conference room by a Secret Service agent and the FBI, and then they pushed him to the ground, and they put handcuffs on him. That's terrible. And then there was this sorry, sad man, oh, so brave, throwing himself, not a pity party, but crying about the death of democracy.
Senator Alex Padilla, do you guys have some questions? I'm going to read a brief statement.
I do think it's funny he has to begin by saying again that he's Alex Padilla because no one knows who he is. Up until that point, no one in this country, except the one person who accidentally voted for him in California, knows who this man is. By the end of his little press conference, he's doing little sobbing, this is the end of democracy.
Rights, for our fundamental rights. I was there peacefully. At one point, I had a question. And so I began to ask a question.
You know, like when you're in class and you raise your hand and then you charge the teacher down screaming at her. I just had a question.
I was almost immediately forcibly removed from the room.
Okay, you can't be almost immediately and forcibly removed. You were either almost forcibly removed, which doesn't make sense. You can't be almost immediately removed either. So anyway, he's just the dramatics.
I was forced to the ground, and I was handcuffed.
Just like George Floyd. That's horrible. Well, unfortunately for him, the press didn't have his back initially either. Both CNN and CBS had reporters that came out and said he didn't even identify himself. He wasn't wearing a security badge, which lets Secret Service and FBI know, hey, he's a senator, don't arrest him. And also, in a time when there is more anti-ICE, anti-Department of Homeland Security sentiment from the left, to the point of which there are open assassination and murder attempts on ICE officers, maybe, just maybe, the guy yelling at Kristi Noem as he is moving towards her is a bit of a threat. Makes a lot of sense. And then we got the real footage, not just the kind of after-action footage. And it turns out, don't you know, he didn't come say, hi, I'm Senator Padilla. It's good to see you, Kristi Noem. He just blusters forward to the front of the room and starts yelling. Again, it looks drunkenly.
Secretary, I want to know why you insist so I want to say thank you to every single person that has been able to do this. Hands up. Also, I want to talk to Senator Alex Padilla.
Okay. Not until he is shoved essentially a good 2/3 of the way out of the room does he then decide to tell the officers, I am Senator Padilla. Just in front of them, hey, there's illegal. And the Secret Service is like, who let the crackhead from Speedway in the building? And started giving him the old 1-2 kaboo, get out of here. And again, after that, we get to the detaining and all of the other stuff. He wasn't even arrested officially. And then he met with Noem 15 minutes later, and they talked about it. Had himself a nice good cry, maybe shot a dog together, whatever things Kristi Noem loves to do. We got to send the radio folks over to commercial. We'll see you in a second. It's the Tony Kinnett cast. I'm afraid it doesn't quite stop there, because then the Democrats, they were outraged. They were mad. In what might be one of my favorite clips on social media of all time, this is posted by Jamie Raskin. He posts a 4-second video of himself just walking on a loop. He's not saying anything. He's not doing anything. He's out there power walking. And the quote is, the brutal handcuffing of Senator Padilla is an affront to democracy. The brutal handcuffing. What is not brutal handcuffing? They make it sound like they pulled out the handcuffs like nunchucks and like pistol whipped him with it across the face. This handcuffed him. Very simple. Don't look at me like that. You get your mind out of the gutter. And he says, I'm joining House Democrats to march to Senator Thune's office and to demand that he protect his colleagues from this out-of-control authoritarian onslaught. That doesn't make sense either. You're mad at the executive branch, right? Kristi Noem is a Secretary of Homeland Security for the president. So you're mad at the executive branch, the Secret Service, executive agency, and the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI, executive agencies, for detaining him. So, I mean, Kristi Noem didn't point at him and go, there, that man, drag him to the gallows. No, why are you going to yell at John Thune about it? I can imagine John Thune, they're like doing kind of a Sudoku. It's like, there's 2 3s over here. And the door busts open and it's just Jamie Raskin doing a walking cycle. Like it's an 80s workout tape. Incredible. This is truly one of the most amazing times in American politics. And the Democrats are getting raked over the coals for this. And they should be, because it's complete and utter nonsense. Now, of course, the media then gets involved. And truly one of the greatest moments, I think, in kind of modern media, given what we know about Jake Tapper, then occurs. So just as a very quick refresher here, Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson of Axios, Jake Tapper of CNN, they co-wrote a book called Original Sin, which was about the Biden administration covering all of this shady stuff up about who was running the White House and whether the president was alive or dead and who knew, and media members covered up for him too. And Alex Thompson got up in front of the WHCA dinner and he said, we need to hold people accountable. I made mistakes. You made mistakes. We need to do better. And then Jake Tapper got out and said, yeah, as media, we need to do better. We shouldn't just take the Democrats at their face value. He literally stated, him being Alex Thompson, that the media was so gullible that Democrats in the Biden administration were shocked that the Biden team would just tell them something they made up on the fly and the media would run with it like full Axios or CNN headline, like boom, immediately. So we've had all of this like reckoning, right? We've had all of these like come to Jesus kind of moments. At least I was told that. In the media, they crossed their heart and promised Scouts honor that, boy, they were never going to mess up again. Boy, howdy, they learned their lesson. Never again would they fall to such skullduggery. And that lasted all of about 15 minutes. Because what followed was something incredible. Incredible indeed. So again, as I've said, CNN reporter, I believe her name is Stephanie, along with a CBS reporter who was in the Alex Padilla press conference situation, saw exactly what happened and ended up reporting on it. And we're going to bring the radio crew back from commercial, and I'm going to explain why just things go completely off the rail afterwards. So stick around. We'll be right back. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal.
The Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
Okay, so as I was just telling the live stream crew, dear radio listeners, so a CNN reporter had the goods in the room on Senator Alex Padilla getting the old bouncer shuffle. And then, well, check it out.
And that's the other key point. He started talking first, and when he started talking, he took a couple of steps. It was not a lunge, as it's been characterized, and then there were immediately hands on him from her detail, people pushing him away.
So just two things here really quickly. Again, pointing out, yeah, hey, this guy, he didn't announce who he was. He just started talking, and then he started taking steps towards her. It wasn't a lunge. Okay. I'm sorry. Are we really getting out like the health education books and going, a proper lunge is when you lean forward? Get out of here. Get out of here with that nonsense. Not a lunge has been described. That's such media bullcrap. It wasn't a lunge. It was more of a forward-leaning walk, actually, with just a hint of power stepping. Okay.
And back and moving him away from them. During that time is when he identified himself. So he did not identify himself first when he was asking the question and interrupting her. And those are two things I think are very important to note how this went down.
Now, that is a very clear report from this reporter from CNN, Stephanie, who was in the room. I may not agree with how she characterized it, but she made very clear, very, very clear, that in fact the reason he was grabbed is his own fault. He didn't even tell them who he was until he was 2/3 of the way out the door, which, I will point out, I shared with you guys watching the video the very first time we wound through it the other night. Jake Tapper, very soon afterward, throws his own CNN reporter under the bus. Mr. Totally Reformed and Changed over here. Nick Fondacaro of the MRC sent this to us. Look at this nonsense.
How do you view it?
Well, just watch the video. I mean, within the first 2 seconds of him standing up, he identified himself as, I'm Senator Alex Padilla. He identifies exactly who he is. He tries to ask a question. He tries to do what every American has the right to do, which is, your First Amendment rights.
I'm sorry, I can't help it. I have to jump in here because Jake Tapper is known for cutting in on Trump officials specifically. For example, some of the viral clips that were played when someone like, let's say, Lara Trump said Biden has dementia. Tapper cut her off at the pass, swooped in like paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne, like, stop right there. How dare you make fun of stuttering children? He has no problem. Senator Tammy Duckworth starts talking about this and starts making false claims. Tapper, I guarantee you Tapper's seen the video. I guarantee you Tapper knows that she's lying. And instead, you have Tapper just sitting there, yes, continue, Senator.
And what we see, the response is really, a pure un-American authoritarianism. And it should scare us off, because if they can do this to a U.S. senator, they can do this to the average American.
In your view, is there anything?
Again, in your view, why don't you just talk? In your view, Miss Tammy Duckworth, in your view, let me kiss your feet, Tammy Duckworth. Oh, for the love of sweet, good Mike. What is this nonsense? This is why, by the way, for those who I know tune into the show from some of these particular networks, this is why no one trusts you and there is no redemption for you from this. None. You do this to yourself every single time without end. Amen. It doesn't matter. The kind of bias that is shown from when a Republican is sitting in front of you versus when a Democrat is sitting in front of you is so palpably different. You can display it on the posters you think the Gestapo are putting up. So again, the kind of bleeding and crying we're going to get to just a little bit later because, goodness gracious, Cory Booker went on his little Spartacus routine, yelling and screaming and crying. AOC is, I guess, interested in auditing petting zoos. I will point this out before we get to it, just because it's worth noting here. At least as far as Padilla is concerned, he is already fundraising off of this. Yesterday afternoon, I tried to ask a question at the public DHS press conference. I was forcibly removed, slammed to the ground. I've seen him just be pushed to the ground. They act like he was Hulk Hogan slammed. I'm sorry, if we're going to pick what is a lunge and what isn't a lunge, then we're not going to equate being like shoved onto one's knees in the ground steadily to, getting the half Nelson, like the Hulk Hogan, oh brother, you gotta reckon it now. I don't think so. Trump and ICE are terrorizing immigrant communities, targeting schools and workplaces, which is also not true. It's a very misleading statement. Like they're bursting into schools and they're like, all right, all of the brown 4-year-olds into the van. They're not doing that. I will not stop fighting to demand accountability on behalf of the people of California. Well, we can't say the citizens of California now, can he? So amazing, amazing stuff. Congrats to the Democrats for not learning their lesson. The other crew who has not learned their lesson whatsoever are in fact the Iranians. The Iranians have not learned their lesson at all. So as a quick recap, last night while we were on the air, we received word that Israel had in fact begun striking Iran. And we aired footage on the show of several plumes of smoke rising from Tehran. These, at the time, we believed to be anti-aircraft sites. And some of those were, in fact, anti-aircraft batteries, SAM surface-to-air missile sites. But they also included places in which the entire general staff of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps was at. Wiped, erased from existence, gone. We also discovered that the Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, and also one of my favorite characters in the most outlandish conspiracy theories of all time, the Mossad actually set up a secret drone facility underground near Tehran over the last several months, I think like 7 or 8 months, and used that, again, just like this temporary underground drone facility they built in Iran in order to carry out several of the strikes. I do also want to point out some of the targeting that was in fact carried out here was mostly focused in the northwestern portions of the country. We reported that on air as well, trying to get all of our P's and Q's in a line there. These sites included mostly military structures and areas that serviced Iran's burgeoning nuclear program. And just for the record, this is not the first time that Israel has set back the Iranian nuclear program. I've seen a lot of articles online. People are saying, well, everyone's been warning that Iran's going to have a nuclear bomb every couple of years since 95, and they never do. Yes, because at the end of those couple of years each time, Israel has undocumented, we have the footage of it, for crying out loud, of Israel committing some kind of an operation in Iran that sets the nuclear program back by about 5 to 10 years. We have now done this at this point at least 5 or 6 times. David Harasani over at Washington Examiner, he's been on the show a couple of times. He was talking about this today on X. It was a very, very good point to be made. This is not unusual. And Netanyahu has, in fact, been calling for this for a very, very, very long time. And so what we know now is that it looks like the Trump administration was warned in advance, and an extremely precise series of strikes were carried out. So allow me to explain very briefly about something that I won't go into detail about why I know a lot about this. It is ridiculously difficult. This is an apartment that was hit that was targeting one of the chief nuclear scientists, who is now no more. The precision of this airstrike hits the side of the building, and from what we can see, only took out one apartment. For an airstrike, that's unreal. That is a level of precision we've just never witnessed in modern military. We've never seen it, ever. I don't care. I don't care what team you're on. I don't care what country you're a fan of. I don't care what on the World Cup side you're rooting for here. On a level of professional appreciation, in the way that any man would admire really good woodworking, military precision that absolutely could have leveled that entire apartment building just like that. There is documentation in the training for drone pilots and for fighter pilots that explains different cultures and how they set up essentially kind of load-bearing walls, where to hit the building so the whole thing comes down. That level of precision is incredible. That's just free commentary that's true. So we're going to talk about the strike a little bit more here while we send the radio crew over to commercial. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal. Okay, now we get into some really, really interesting stuff. So throughout the daylight, so again, last night, right before dawn, is when in Tehran, is when Israel started carrying out a lot of these preemptive strikes. And then in daylight, in previous series of attacks or retaliations or series of events between Israel and Iran, Israel would essentially then return home and sit there and wait and count on the Iron Dome and THAAD batteries to take out whatever Iran sent back. We saw this in the fall. This time, that was not, in fact, the case whatsoever. Israel maintained, effectively, air superiority over Iran, not with the help of the United States. There are no U.S. jets in a forward operating position right now in Iran. None. As of right now, 7:45 p.m. Eastern. Israel maintained such air dominance over Iran that it was able to complete refueling operations over Syria and into Western Iran, which is, again, that's just unbelievable. That kind of air dominance. The precise targeting of missile batteries, again, that level of precision is just impressive. Really, the only two other nations that I have seen execute that kind of precise military tactics are the British whenever they send the Special Air Service, the SAS, to do something, and then anything involving the SEALs. That's just very well crafted and executed military planning. But again, the same country that pulled off selling the Hezbollah terror group pagers that it then used to blow up Hezbollah terrorists with, not entirely unexpected. So Netanyahu released a statement calling this Operation Rising Lion.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion.
You guys can go find that whole statement. I just don't have the time to show it. Rising Lion is a reference to what used to be on the flag of Persia before Persia was violently swept up in the fundamentalist Iranian uprising, and the national sport of Iran stopped being soccer and it started being abusing women. So the Rising Lion is a symbol of Persia, which is what Israel looks like they want to accomplish here. That's just from my personal perspective. Not speaking on behalf of anybody. That's just for me. It looks like Israel is not only trying to effectuate change via the elimination of the nuclear program, which, by the way, up until the sunset of today in Israel and Iran, do we have this particular footage? I believe that we do. Yes, clips 3 and 4 here. Israel continually struck all of these nuclear facilities in broad daylight. And a lot of these nuclear facilities are, well, no more. By the way, that little black stripe in the corner there, that's a sign of mourning from the Iranian state TV, which is to say all of Iranian TV. Now, we're going to bring in the radio crew here in just a second. I do want to point out that right now, there are, in fact, some ballistic missile attacks that were expected from Iran into Israel. One of them does appear to have gotten through in Tel Aviv. You can see the Iron Dome and the David slingshot trying to intercept. One does, in fact, get through. This is ongoing. We'll talk about this a little bit more. But from all intents and purposes, it looks like Iran is struggling very seriously. Tony Kinnett here on the Daily Signal.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right. We're going to talk a little bit more about some of the news updates, and then I'm going to hit a commentary point that I have been itching to hit for about 18 months, maybe 2 years. So we'll get there in just a second, but I don't know if we'll need to change the Chiron to unnecessary hot takes because I have been waiting for this moment for 2 years to have the talk with y'all that I'm about to have. So if anything, stick around for that. To kind of close things out, Secretary Marco Rubio issued a statement saying that they supported the unilateral action taken by Israel to defend itself, although the United States was not involved. We're essentially trying to take, quote, all necessary steps to protect our forces and remain in close contact with our regional partners. Let me be clear, Iran should not target U.S. interests or personnel. President Trump is just one of the greatest trolls of all time. Has, by the way, not even tried to hide. Yeah, he's like, yeah, they told me about it beforehand. He hasn't said those exact words, but the words he's used very clearly indicate he knew about this beforehand. He's not surprised. He said, quote, Iran cannot have a nuclear bomb, and we're hoping to get back to the negotiating table, which Steve Witkoff was supposed to meet with the Iranians again on Sunday. He said, we'll see. There are several people in leadership that will not be coming back. And then the cojones, I love it. The United States then officially reached out to Iran and said, by the way, you are still invited to negotiate. You want to take the deal now? Which, as you guys know how much I hate saying that I was right. That was the third prediction. When Iran firmly slammed the door in the United States' face on Friday and had their Ayatollah come out and say, death to America, death to Israel, death to my cousin Kevin, dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow, dishonor on your family, all that stuff. That That slamming of the door in Trump's face and then saying these stupid Americans and their stupid president, they're not as sophisticated as we Iranians and our Ayatollah and their goat humping, that kind of stuff. No, I'm sorry, I'm afraid not, Chief. Trump didn't like that. And at that point, I think that Trump most likely, again, this is just my personal opinion, looking at the situation, then looked over to Netanyahu, where this had been developing as a quiet operation possibility for 7 or 8 months, where Israel and the United States appear to have been feigning a diplomatic falling out, up to and possibly including Mike Waltz stepping down from National Security Advisor and being appointed to the UN may in fact have been a part of this ruse, which is, I'm sorry, I never give Trump the benefit of the doubt on 4D chess. This is incredibly brilliant planning. It is. I don't know who is to praise for it. I would like to think, based on some of the markers of the communication on this, that Vance and Rubio and Hegseth, the three of them, likely planned a lot of this out with essentially creating a system of plausible deniability for the United States and then letting Israel do what it needed to do. That is my personal take on the situation. That said, we're going to swing over to commercial break very, very, very briefly, and then we're going to come back for a little bit of mail time. Don't go anywhere. It's the Tony Kinnett Cast.
This is the Tony Kinnett Cast on 93 WIBC.
All right, it's time for a bit of mail time. So mail time is, again, a little viewer involvement kind of a segment here where you guys send us questions, and they could be serious questions or extra stupid questions, and we break them down just transparently here on the air just for you. More than happy just to kind of bring together what you guys think are important to the show right here at the end. So let's talk very, very briefly here. So this one from Applebee's. He says, do you think that pallets of bricks will mysteriously appear all over the country just like the Summer of Love? I think that it's likely. It doesn't help that in the summertime, there's a lot of landscaping going on anyway, and so it's very easy to move one pallet over from one place to another. I think that it is possible. I hope not. For example, in Indianapolis, a lot of those on the left, some of the people who hate me the most in the whole world here in my home state, it was a very kind of peaceful demonstration. Again, there wasn't really much to yell about, but there wasn't any brick grabbing or throwing, and that is in fact a far better use of those on the left's time. Other than that, I'd suggest, getting a job. So the next question from Nifrandiel. Interesting. He says, good evening. I'm interested in the implications of Ted Lieu calling on the National Guard to question the legality of their orders. They are doing everything possible to start an actual civil war. So, there is nothing in the Constitution or federal law that suggests that you or another federal official who doesn't already have command over troops, like if you tell a soldier, hey, disobey that order, that's not a crime. That's really scummy, and that's really awful. But unless you're actually committing something very directly, as in you are ordering them from some type of, again, Congress does not have any general authority in an individual member or even a committee level to do anything other than subpoena. And if you are going to subpoena an active troop, the Department of Defense actually plays a role in determining some of the stakes for any particular hearing, whether it's closed and open door, for example. So in this particular case, do I like Ted Lieu? No. He's a clown. But is what he's doing illegal? I haven't really seen it specifically. But if he is just saying, hey, don't follow orders, he's just an idiot. A malicious one for sure, but that's kind of my take on that one. So next question here comes from 6 numbers. 27311 over on Rumble. All right. Doesn't the DSCA give the president and the DOD the ability to support any federal agency on repeat by the lead agency? So I'm assuming that by the DSCA, you mean the Defense Security Cooperation Agency. As far as the essential, what I'm assuming, either you're asking me about financial support or you're asking me about military support. If you're asking me about financial support, no, because Congress is the holder of the purse. One federal agency, like for example, PBS couldn't take part of its federal dollars and then just like sling and allocate those over to like the Department of Agriculture. No. But as far as can Trump bring in support to back up federal agents on federal property, yes. If Trump wanted to send in the army, he might have to declare an insurrection act to send in the standing army. But as far as Title 10, or if he wanted to send in like a huge chunk of the FBI or a huge DEA team, God knows there's a lot of DEA agents, a lot of ATF agents. Yeah, you can send those in. You can. But often those agents aren't always trained to do a lot of riot work in situations like guardsmen are. Guardsmen are, I mean, you guys have seen the billboards of like Army or Air National Guard handling things where there's like some kind of a natural disaster that's gone through or some kind of a civil order situation. Yeah, the Guard's trained for that. I mean, this is an actual application for the National Guard. The Democrats don't want to admit that. They've put in media articles, well, actually, there's lots of troops here instead of in Syria. Good. Number one. But no, that's really an actual National Guard position. So that stuff particularly said. Oh, yes. I'm so excited for this question here. This is from DiGiorno. If you're trying to spell DiGiorno, you goofed. How much did Israel pay you to go to bat for them? Great question. Great question. The answer is none. I, in fact, am more than happy to dole out commentary and analysis on whatever. And I'm not a fan of the Netanyahu regime. I'm not against the Netanyahu regime or term or administration or whatever you want to call it. To be completely honest with you, I do have a serious problem with fundamentalist Islam, the very radical kind that commits serious and egregious acts of terror. Once we get to that point, whether that mess is dealt with by a group of Sunni Islamists, for example, like in Kurdistan, or through the Israeli Defense Force, at that point matters very little to me. But to answer your question far more seriously than it deserves, I have called for the United States to wean Israel off of federal funds of any kind. I don't think that we should be forwarding any amount of money to those who do not owe us things in return. My foreign policy view is very Teddy Rooseveltian. It's kind of a strong-armed imperialist form where I believe that the United States views are in fact supreme because it's the greatest country on earth. We've rebuilt the world after World War II, almost single-handedly. And so if we have a trade deal or we have a military deal with a country, it should come with explicit conditions for that country, politically, militarily, and economically. And for that reason, I think, yeah, well, since Israel doesn't have any explicit like line items, this is what we're going to do for the U.S., this is how we're going to, this is how we're going. Well, at that point, I think that they should be weaned off of it then. So that's my very serious answer to a very stupid question that usually comes rustling under the dandruff and the tinfoil. So that particular thing. Last question here because, I'm particularly enjoying mail time this evening. Ah, yes. Okay. Are you using a Flowbee these days? Nice haircut. That's from Vic Ferrari. No. On the bottom of the screen here, normally during the show, there are some banner advertisements. And I do, in fact, go to the Castle Point barbershop in Newcastle, where I have gone and I will go until I die because they give a great haircut and they don't rip me off. I don't know, there's something about a guy cutting a guy's hair that's not cut kind of like a lady's hair that I appreciate. I'm not much of a going to great clips kind of guy. I think that going to a barbershop is kind of one of the tried and true traditions for men in the United States that's fallen by the wayside. And I think that's a shame. So leave it to me to turn, an argument into into that kind of a community argument. Oh, defense support for civilian agencies. So, sorry, to answer the prior question that was actually about Trump supporting other agencies with federal agencies. Like, can't the National Guard be brought in to support FEMA during disasters? Yes, but I guess I'm wondering in what context you might mean. Shoot us an email. I'll talk to you about it kind of one-on-one. You go to TonyKinnett.com, and we'll chat about that one. I'm more interested in that question. Okay, well, with that particular question, I think we can wrap it up for the weekend. And oh my goodness, I'm so silly. My goodness, I can't believe that I've forgotten. AOC was talking about ducks today in the House, and I haven't played it for you guys yet. That's so embarrassing. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was complaining about fascism today, and she started quacking, just giving her little duck speech and like tilting her head real weird in the House. Here you go.
Hey, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, maybe it's a duck.
You go, girl. If it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, maybe it identifies as a goose because gender. Fantastic. I love it. AOC talking gives me glee. And then, of course, one last thing. I didn't play Cory Booker's impassioned, desperate speech, and I would feel bad going into the weekend if I didn't. So just as a little bonus treat here.
And this son of Mexican immigrants who clean homes and serve food.
What if his parents or he didn't do that? What if he's like, and this son of Polish immigrants who worked in an insurance company and did nude modeling in Connecticut. Like, I don't think they'd celebrate that the same way, or maybe they would. I'm not sure. Cory Booker has championed less.
This man with equal dignity in this body today was driven violently to his knees, as if made to kneel before the authority of the executive, because he was so-called disrespectful. That should offend the consciousness, not just of the other 99 members of this body, it should offend the conscience of this country. Because if you can make Alex Padilla forcibly kneel before this executive, when does it stop? He's a United States Senator.
All right, that's great. That's enough. I love it. Every time he speaks, it sounds more like a junior high production of the New York Post explaining a Shakespearean play. Doesn't quite work, but I mean, it's there. I love it. All right, that's enough for this particular week. Go get some rest, and I hope and pray, as I sure hope that y'all hope and pray as well. Number one, for the Americans that are over in the Middle East, that they get home safely. A lot of our friends, particularly of the show, Scott Jennings, still over there. Keep those individuals in your prayer. Pray for peace, and we will see you on Monday. This is the Tony Kinnett Cast here on the Daily Signal, nationally syndicated, first on 93 WIBC. Take care.